Well, it does seem to me that, unfortunately, if you haven't encountered, if you can't look at a jellyfish and see how miraculously complex it is, I don't know why it is, but people seem to look at, say, a computer and say, well, that's the computer. I don't know how it works, but it does, the silly job I give to it. And so they don't know how to look at prose, something man-made or something natural, and see that its beauty is in resolving complexity into a kind of organism, order.
And part of that is maybe the fault of some sort of reading culture or something, but part of it is that fiction's got a very weird and complicated job, because part of its job is to teach the reader, communicate with the reader, establish some sort of relationship with the reader where the reader is willing on a neurological level to expend effort to look hard enough at the jellyfish to see that it's pretty. And that kind of effort is very hard to talk about, and it's real scary because you can't be sure whether you've done it or not. And it's what makes you sort of clutch your heart when somebody says, I really like this, it didn't strike me as gratuitous, because that's, of course, your great hope when you're doing it.
Well,
does that make any sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Doubly so, because I have to explain. I first met John Barth when Lost in the Funhouse had just come out. I was a student at Buffalo. Chimera was about to appear. There were, between the Lost in the Funhouse publication and Chimera, many, many years of confusion and indecision. And to some extent, although there will never be an influence as great on my life as to be in the presence of that man, I feel in many ways he took a wrong turning, and that what we see now is two things: a squirming, the feeling that the turning was so narrowly wrong that it can be rectified. So you see almost books being written again and again in the attempt not exactly to get them right, but to find out where they went wrong. And the other is the strange quality, and you find it in your books as well, that he solved certain of life's problems in ways that he thought that life couldn't be solved. He's become happy. He's become uxorious, and he truly loves someone. And this is something that seems to be difficult for fiction that began with a nihilist bent to reconcile.
Yeah, one of the things, now I'm not going to be able to remember the titles, but there have been short pieces that have appeared recently. There was one in Harper's, and there were 3 in conjunctions, and it's very interesting to watch this. You're right, the vibe is discomfort at being happy, discomfort about how to write about, sort of heartcraft, and real kind of stuff that in the 60s I think would have seemed real cheesy and cliche and sentimental, through the kind of filter that he's so very carefully built. When you were talking, the thing that amuses me is the stuff that he's going back and rewriting is, for me, the stuff that's alive. I mean, for me, all the way, I think through parts of Lost in the Funhouse, I'm with him. And it's starting with Chimera that I think he becomes this sort of clangbird that flies in ever-diminishing circles, although gorgeously. And I mean, he writes some of the best prose in America. But he was a very big deal for me because I sort of broke. I think I really saw myself as coming out of that tradition. And then in the late 80s, worked on a real long story that's sort of a reworking of Lost in the Funhouse, and really think that I came to see that there was nothing but involution and basically masturbation, for me anyway, in that kind of game-playing, meta-move, intertextual stuff. And I too had a number of years where I didn't write any fiction and really had no idea where to go after doing Westward, which was the long story.
I'm speaking to David Foster Wallace, the author of Infinite Jest. This may be hard to do, but can you find a way of saying what the difference is between that kind of involution and the complexities of this novel?
Boy. I probably can't do it and sound very smart or coherent, but I know that I guess when I was in my 20s, like deep down underneath all the bullshit, what I really believed was that the point of fiction was to show that the writer was really smart. And it sounds terrible to say, but I think, looking back, that's what was going on. And I don't think I really understood what loneliness was when I was a young man. And now I've got a much less clear idea of what the point of art is, but I think it's got something to do with loneliness and something to do with setting up a conversation between human beings. And I know that when I started this book, I had very vague and not very ambitious ambitions, and one was I wanted to do something really sad. I'd done comedy before. I wanted to do something really sad, and I wanted to do something about what was sad about America. And there's a fair amount of weird and hard technical stuff going on in this book, but I mean, one reason why I'm willing to go around and talk to people about it, and that I'm sort of proud of it in a way I haven't been about earlier stuff, is that I feel like whatever's hard in the book is in service of something that, at least for me, is good and important. And it's embarrassing to talk about because I think it sounds kind of cheesy. I sort of think, like, all the way down kind of to my butthole, I was a different person coming up with this book than I was about my earlier stuff. And I'm not saying my earlier stuff was all crap, but it's just, it seems like, I think when you're very young and until you've sort of faced various darknesses, it's very difficult to understand how precious and rare the sort of thing that art can do is. You're welcome to cut all this out if this just sounds like, a craft product. Or
No. It seems to me, this is what I noticed, and maybe it's not there, but it seems to me that on the one hand, in Infinite Jest by my guest David Foster Wallace, there's a very high-tech tennis academy bent on training prodigies. And prodigies can be trained, and one might say that the result of such a training in the novel might be a novel like Letters by John Barth, that there's a lot of internal structure, a lot of complicated intertextual exchange, that brilliance is in a way the subject of that novel, even while it attempts to blow itself up. It's like the mad scientist who says, I'm going to take everyone and all of my characters with me. And then there's another kind of school, it seems to me, that maybe up until around 1973, it was perhaps important to be smart. But then suddenly you looked outside the universities and you said, well, these people in the university are not all that interesting.